Hey there, welcome to another episode of the HomeTech Podcast. Jason Griffin here, so happy to have you with us. I am joined by my partner, Seth Johnson. Seth, how you feeling?
Yeah, a little bit better.
Back amongst the living?
Yeah, about probably 80%, I say.
Well, that's good. I know you've been struggling. It's going around.
Yeah, I'm at least warm in my house. You're saying that you have no heat.
It's brutal, man. It is, a lot of people think of Colorado and they think cold, but it doesn't typically get quite as cold as it is right now. We are actually off our normal schedule a little bit, recording early on a Thursday morning here, and it is -5 degrees outside. And it has this spate of abnormally cold weather has brought to light something we didn't realize before, which is that our furnace isn't quite working properly. So wasn't really an issue when the temperatures were more typical, but now that it's so cold, it is just not keeping up. And you should see me. I'm quite bundled up down here. Our house is about 61 degrees, and that's Fahrenheit for our listeners overseas, which is pretty cold for inside of a house. Wouldn't be quite as big of a deal, but we have young children here, so we're a little bit concerned, and that's definitely something we'll be having to deal with here today, hopefully.
People would be dying in Florida if it was 61 degrees outside. So yeah, man, I feel your pain. I got to say, the show is probably going to be sponsored by a cup of coffee or two, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're hoping we can get that taken care of. But let's jump in and get started here. Another great show. We had Kenny Kim on. He is the product manager of OVRC, which is Snap AV's RSM remote systems management platform, and really enjoyed my conversation with him. Seth, you were not able to join me. I know you were still on the mend a little bit with your voice. Had a great chat with him. Look forward to sharing that with our listeners. So be sure to stay tuned. Again, Kenny Kim, product manager at OVRC. As usual, we're going to jump into a few news stories before we hit the interview. But before we do that, we wanted to give a quick shout out. New patron Todd Blunt came on board at the $5 level. And Todd, we really, really appreciate you taking the time and, providing that generous support to the show. If you're listening and you're interested in learning how you can support the podcast, if you find what we do here entertaining or educational and you want to contribute, you can find out more about that at HomeTech.fm/support. Again, that's HomeTech.fm/support. And that'll give you some information about how you too can become a patron. That's something you can do for as little as $1 a month.
Absolutely. I want to just one more shout out again for Todd. Thanks very much. We appreciate everyone who has become a patron of the show and thrown a little bit of cash our way, because it definitely does go a long way with the show and paying for some of the expenses and hosting and some of the other stuff that we're doing with HomeTech Academy. It's a little bit of money, but it goes a long way for us too, I think.
Yeah, definitely. We really appreciate that. So let's jump into news here. Actually, one more quick thing before we do that. I did want to make sure that we tease next week's episode for regular listeners of our show who have been tuned in for a year or so. You'll probably be familiar with what we did last year around this time, which was the technology.fm fireside chat. And technology.fm is probably something, Seth, we should do a better job of mentioning that more often. It's a kind of a collection of podcasts you can go to at that URL, technology.fm. That's a curated site by Mike Wolf, who does the Smart Home Show and is a Forbes contributor, very respected in the smart home space. And he's put a nice collection of podcasts over there together. So listeners to our show would be encouraged to go check that out. Again, technology.fm. But what we're doing is bringing together Mike, who, like I said, does the Smart Home Show, as well as Richard Gunther, who does Home On, great friend of the show. Both guys, I really respect their opinions in the smart home. And we're bringing them together with you and myself for the technology.fm fireside chat. This will be the second annual time we've done it, and we're going to pick apart some of the biggest stories of the year and make some predictions for next year. Had a ton of fun doing that last year, and I really look forward to doing it again this year.
Yeah, I was just about to say that it was a lot of fun sitting down with those two guys and recording, kind of a cross podcast. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and we were able to sit down, get everybody's schedule lined up, sit down and just sit back and chat a little bit about, what we saw that was really interesting in 2015 at the time, and what we thought was going to be, the trend in 2016. So really, really fun discussion and fun group of people to sit down and talk with, I think.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, let's get started here. Like I said, we've got a handful of news stories that we're going to hit on before we get into our interview with Kenny Kim from OVRC. And one of the first ones we wanted to talk about was a CE Pro article similar to our Fireside Chat. This is something that Julie does annually, and I always look forward to these. It's the top 5 home technology trends and opportunities for 2017. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about hers. I'm sure a number of these will cross over into our Fireside Chat next week, but did just want to run down the bullet point list here and maybe share just a couple of quick thoughts on them. So number 1, she's got virtual reality, augmented reality, and 360-degree video. I think that's a big one, hearing a ton about VR. I have to admit, Seth, I have not had a chance to try one of these VR headsets. Have you?
Yeah, I actually had a chance to try one on my wife's uncle actually had one at a Thanksgiving dinner that we were eating, and he brought it out, and we were all riding around on roller coasters and just, seeing what it can do. But it's very basic at this point, but it's very entertaining too. So I think this is definitely one of those things that we'll have to see how it pans out next year. Very interesting technology. Very, very interesting.
And inexpensive too, relatively. One of the applications I've heard of for our specific, the home technology professional space, which I thought was kind of cool, is companies that do really high-end home theater design can put together a concept theater and lay it out, and then have potential customers put on one of these headsets and have it as if they're walking through or standing inside of that conceptual theater
that's smart.
That they just designed. And so that's something that I've heard a couple, a small handful of people talking about, and I think that could be a really interesting opportunity, particularly for home technology professionals operating at that really high end of the market. But let's move on here. Number 2, IP device discovery and data collection. I think kind of a mouthful there. I think this ties in pretty closely to what you and I have spent a lot of time talking about in the past couple of months, which is RSM. Big topic on this episode and in general in the industry. Remote systems management is a huge one for the industry, and I think that's, I would say, generally what Julie is getting at with this one. Although I think she's kind of coming at it a little bit differently and talking about the data that can be collected using these systems and what that data could be used for. Insurance companies for risk mitigation, for example, is one that she cites. Going to move through these others pretty quick. We got a lot to cover here. Voice control, obviously a huge one for next year, and clearly something everyone in the industry as well as end users are looking at. New technology deployment paradigms, which kind of gets to how technology is bought and sold. So she has some interesting thoughts there. We won't dive into here, but we'll have a link to this in the show notes at HomeTech.fm/140. And then pre-wiring, back to the future. What's old is new again here, and builders looking to get solid infrastructure in the home is a big one where, I agree and disagree. I still think a lot of builders are falsely banking on wireless as a cure-all. But I do think that technologies like 4K video have made pre-wiring very important as ever. And so I think she's got some great points on all those. And again, if you want to check that out, we'll include a link at HomeTech.fm/140.
Yep, it was a good story. Interesting to see what will come out of 2017. I kind of apprehensive about the fiber optic one at the bottom, but 4K video is going to require a lot more bandwidth. But I have my own opinions about
a couple of different ways to go about that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Also want to plug one of the stories that you wrote for Resi Systems, and that's the 5 biggest home tech stories of 2016. You've got Wi-Fi systems, security, voice control, RSM, which will be big next year too, and physical control, a big one for you every year.
I had to get that one in there,
yep,
right?
Exactly.
It's happening. It's happening. I'm telling you, there's a renaissance going on. It just people haven't. Well, I shouldn't say people, but I don't think enough people have been paying attention there. But I think that's going to continue to be a big trend. Just these things like the flick button, and Logitech has their pop home switch and all that. I laugh a little bit. Lutron's got the Pico remote for Sonos that they're touting right now, and I always joke, it's an audio keypad, and like I said when we talked about the last story, what's old is new again. Things go in cycles, so I think I think users just really like physical control, and there's some app fatigue going on. So yeah, we'll include a link to that in the show notes as well.
Definitely. And if you're listening to the show and you thought a story, we've missed a story for 2016, what was the biggest story of 2016? We'd love to hear your feedback, especially before we sit down and record that fireside chat with Mike and Richard, and just want to see if we can get some feedback from everybody. So if you want to, hop on over to HomeTech.fm/feedback and let us know what you thought was the biggest story of 2016. I'm really curious to see what, I think we have our opinions, but I'm curious to see what everybody else thought.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that we're really putting this call out to our listeners, and we really want to know what you think the biggest story of 2016 was. And like Seth said, if you hop over to HomeTech.fm/feedback, there's a really quick form there. It takes just a minute to fill that out and send it over, and you'll have a chance to be featured on the show. We'll give you a little nod if we mention your story. And so we really, again, just want to encourage our listeners to let us know. We want to hear from you and know what you think was the biggest story of 2016. So once again, HomeTech.fm/feedback is the way to do that. Let's move on here. A few more stories we want to touch on before we get into our interview. Big one just broke here a couple of days ago as we're sitting and recording. SnapAV's acquisition trend here continues, and they've acquired Autonomic, a streaming media server company, and pretty big news. I'm not quite sure what to make of it, but obviously Autonomic is a big player in the professional install channel when it comes to streaming audio. They're really the default kind of, I would say, step up, at least in terms of integration capability and flexibility when it comes to these larger systems. They are the default step up from a system like a Sonos. So very big player, and SnapAV is really just on an acquisition frenzy this year.
Yep, they purchased Sunbright earlier in the year, Vigilant just a couple weeks back, which is Sunbright is the outdoor TV company, and Vigilant is high-end security cameras with built-in video analytics. This is interesting. I mean, this is a premium audio server that a lot of guys in the high end use. We're not talking. I think one of their lower price point systems is 4 zones and $2,000 without speakers. So it's not exactly at a $150 or a $200 price point like Sonos. This one gets up there. So I think it's an interesting purchase for SnapAV strategically to kind of round out their audio business from being just amplifiers and speakers to actually having a source and something that they can play through those speakers, and rather than being reliant on dealers and integrators to come up with integrations with other products like Sonos and Denon and all that. So this is really cool. It's good for Autonomic and good for SnapAV.
Yeah, I think it is good for Autonomic. I have to admit, to be perfectly candid, I've been wondering, where is Autonomic going to be if we look at the 5 to 10 year outlook for the industry, just with the price point they're at and the growing sophistication at the lower end of the market. And Sonos is, I guess, reluctant, but still progress nonetheless in terms of integration and all that. And so obviously, there are some advantages to Autonomic that we won't dive into in detail here, and we, integrators who listen to our show will understand that. But I do have to say the competitive landscape is changing, and it's led me to wonder, where Autonomic goes. And I think this acquisition is probably a good thing for them to be backed by the resources of a company like SnapAV. And SnapAV is obviously getting a ton of intellectual property with this acquisition, so I think it's great for them. And my prediction is we'll most likely see some of this intellectual property rolled into some products at a lower price point than what we've traditionally seen with Autonomic.
Yeah, if we could get a $500 retail price single zone media player, which seems from that $2,000 price point, it seems entirely possible. I mean, it could be possible. I don't know.
Without question.
Yeah. So I mean, that would be great. It would compete with Sonos and Denon and everything along those lines. And I mean, I'm just looking at the media services that these guys integrate with: Deezer, iHeartRadio.
Yep.
Yeah. There's a ton of stuff on here. So I think it'd be a home run if we get a nice little single zone media player out of it, and that integrates with everything. I know they have drivers for Control 4, Crestron, all that good stuff. So exciting.
Yep, definitely. Speaking of streaming audio here, Seth, you had a note that you wanted to touch on, and kind of an interesting trend we're starting to see develop with Spotify, specifically in terms of their approach to integration with third-party services.
Yeah, so this last week, Sonos has updated their system to be compliant with what's called Spotify Connect, which, of course, everybody has, the press has actually gone in and said, oh, this is a great thing. You're finally able to control your Sonos system through just the Spotify app, and you don't have to worry about going to the Sonos app. And of course, this leads a lot of head scratching to be done on our side, but this sounds like what customers want. They don't want to hop over to the Sonos app. And more importantly, this is, I guess, what Spotify wants, because they've been forcing everybody to use Spotify Connect rather than a direct integration like Sonos had before, where you would go through the Sonos app, select what music you wanted to play, and it would just come out the speakers that you had selected. Now you'll go to the Spotify app and select the music you want to play and what speakers you want it to come out of, and you don't have to even open the Sonos app.
Right.
Now, this is integration between those two companies, but what it does is it cuts off integration between anybody who is integrated with Sonos. Most notably, the old Extra Vegetable driver now does not work. And I'll put a little screenshot, of someone in our Slack channel sent in that basically says this is unauthorized and it won't be able to be used anymore. That's going to be a problem for people who love Spotify. It is the number one music service worldwide right now. I kind of feel for them, but it's not anything Sonos can do, and it's not anything Control 4 can do. This is 100% on Spotify. This is how they want their interaction with their product to be. If you don't like it, you're gonna have to find something else. And I know that's a tough conversation to have with clients, but it's not being a friendly integration. I mean, there were years where we didn't have very many of these streaming services, and we would push as dealers. We'd push the ones that integrated very well.
Yeah,
and would give us cover art and metadata and information about the song on our touchscreens. I think we're either going to have to go back to that or our control systems. Now, Jason, I need you to be sitting down for this one.
Okay. Hold on. Give me a second. Okay, go ahead.
Our control systems are going to need to work in a multi-app environment.
Oh,
yeah.
Devastating.
It's a paradigm shift, and
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any. This is one interesting way that this is going to happen. We've already seen Crestron kind of kick the bucket on this, right? They jump over to the Sonos app for their integration with Sonos. Anything you can't do in Crestron.
It's like a page flip, right?
Yeah. Anything you can't do in Crestron jumps over to Sonos. And then if you're in Sonos and you need to do something in Spotify, you jump over to Spotify and then back to the Crestron app. I mean,
yeah.
I wonder if that's how it's going to, I don't know if that's how it's going to work. I was reading somewhere and somebody was kind of joking around, but man, it really sounds like we're moving a little bit backwards here, away from integrated solutions and into, I don't know, like it's better for Spotify, but it's not better for everyone else. And I really think that's disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everyone wants to control the experience. And I think that, that to me was one of the Sonos recently, I think last week, sent out an email that was detailing their 7.0 software release. And one of the things that I thought was interesting in that newsletter was they were, I read it as really playing up that ability to now control Sonos from within the Spotify app and not even have to use the Sonos app. If you're a Spotify user and you own Sonos equipment, you can now live within the Spotify app. And Sonos was, in my opinion, really touting that, which I thought was surprising. You and I were talking about this in our Slack channel, the Hub, and totally get that Spotify may be applying leverage there and in a sense forcing Sonos's hand to do that integration. But I don't think there's any way they could force Sonos to really put out shiny marketing pieces about it and really play it up, which I thought they were doing. And I just thought it was surprising because for years and years, Sonos has really been the company that was about controlling that user experience from end to end. And obviously a huge part of that was their app. And so I just thought it was interesting to see that shift happening. And so, like you said, I think it just it speaks to the evolution that we're seeing in that segment of the market.
Yeah, I don't know. If you look between the two companies, Spotify and Sonos, Sonos is a tiny little blip. Spotify revenues topped 2 billion last year, and Sonos, from the accounts that we have, I think they're 500 million a year. I mean, 500 million to 2 billion, it's night and day. So Spotify clearly has the upper hand here. Sonos, I think, just had to say something good about it, because there's nothing good about losing integration with the number one music partner that you have and giving over your user interface to someone else. I mean, that's the problem we've had with Sonos for so long, and it happens to them too. So
yep, yeah,
there you go.
All right, well, let's move on here. Speaking of the user interface story here, Microsoft has a big initiative coming here called the Home Hub, and this is a pretty interesting story. It's a broad initiative, so a lot of this is about just using computing devices, Windows computing devices, obviously, in a shared user environment, and maybe a shift away from that paradigm of every user simply having their own account that you log in and log out of, and providing.
Wait. Did you say hub?
I did.
It doesn't sound like you really actually mean hub, though. Like, I have the bell. I was just ready to hit it right here, but this doesn't sound like it actually is a home automation hub. It sounds like it's more just a random.
I'm on the fence here. Seth, I'm thinking about this right now, and I'm going to say ring the bell.
I'm going to do this.
A half ring.
Yeah, because one, we know Microsoft.
It's halfway. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So anyways, I'll move through this quick here, but yeah, they do have, a lot of this. All of that was to say that a lot of this is not directly related to the smart home. There was a section in this article that we're going to link to in our show notes that does talk about how this does play into the connected home. And, basically they're building software. Should point out that this is not a hardware story per se, but their software does have pieces of it aimed at the connected home. Out of the box, it looks like it's going to support OCF, the Open Connectivity Foundation, as well as Open T2T, which is the Open Translators to Things initiative, which I have to admit I had never heard of.
Yeah, two things I've never heard of. Yeah, exactly.
I've heard of OCF. Yeah, I've heard of OCF, but not the other one. But in any event, there's a voice control play here with Cortana, and I did read in this article as well that they are talking and encouraging third-party hardware manufacturers to eventually produce what will no doubt be an equivalent sort of form factor and device to things like the Amazon Echo and Google Home. So it does speak, I think the key takeaway from this story here is Microsoft is looking very hard at AI and voice control interface, and there are elements of this initiative that do play into the smart home, although the story itself is a little bit bigger than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody is looking into this. I mean, with the success of the Amazon Echo, we even have rumors of an Echo 2 with a touchscreen and better audio. And
That's right.
Let's see, what has a touchscreen and does voice? An iPad or an Amazon Fire tablet. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't make very much sense to me. But it would be interesting to have a little, touch screen or feedback screen. I don't know. I think the thing about the Amazon Echo is it's real low key. Like, it doesn't stand out in your kitchen if you have it in there. It doesn't stand out in the living room. But a touchscreen definitely does. So I'd be curious to see if that rumor has any legs. And of course, we still, holding out hope for Siri in a can. I mean, we know Apple kind of moved their people that were working on the airport, the Wi-Fi products that Apple had and discontinued. And, now there was rumors that they moved them over to Apple TV. So I wonder if they're working on more of a Siri in a can or an Apple Home type product. We have Google Home that has come online, and next year it's going to be a big one. I think. I think Apple can't wait any longer for whatever they're doing. Maybe they can. They've made us wait this long, but
I was going to say it wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens in spring. That'd be the next announcement for product, and maybe we'll have Siri in a can.
Yeah. Apple does like to kind of sit back and let things shake out a little bit and see what works and what doesn't before they bring something to the table. And so I agree, though. I think next year has got to be the year. We've been talking about that for a while, and I'd be surprised if it didn't happen sometime in 2017. One last story here, speaking of Apple, and then we're going to get in, after this story, to our interview with Kenny Kim from OVRC. Apple, it looks like, has finally enabled the single sign-on for TV Everywhere on iOS. And Seth, I want you to speak to this. I know last time we talked about it, you were really hammering on the point and making sure everybody understood that this was something that had previously only been announced at the developer conference and not released out into the wild, so to speak. So what do you know about it right now? Where's it at?
I know that I'm on Comcast, and Comcast doesn't participate with it. So as cool as it sounds, I don't get to use it. But it sounds like a lot of other cable companies have signed on. Comcast and a couple of other competitors have decided to go down the road and develop something that's more open, like an open standard that, not just Comcast, but other, Charter Communications can use as well, rather than a proprietary single sign-on that Apple has developed. I think it's funny that they're actually doing this. I guess it's good that Comcast and Charter are developing an open standard that anyone can use. It doesn't necessarily need to be Apple, approved or whatever. But at the same time, where is it? They're saying now that we've made great progress and expect to enable single sign-on next year. And I just have to laugh about that. I mean, we've heard promises from Comcast and these big cable companies for years that, they were working to improve their product and things like this. And it just never materializes on the timescales that they promise initially. So maybe in 2018, we'll have single sign-on for Comcast. And in the meantime, people who are on DirecTV and Dish Network and that kind of thing,
get to have all the fun.
Yeah, exactly. And sign in once, and then all of your apps, anything you launch that you're subscribed to, just picks up that single sign-on, and you don't have to type in your password again, which is awesome.
Yeah, very convenient, and it is a bummer to see the big boys like Comcast not playing nice. And so we'll keep a close eye on that story, and if we hear any developments or see any developments, obviously we will pass that along. So without any further delay here, let's get into our interview with Kenny Kim. Again, he is the product manager at OVRC, which is SnapAV's RSM platform. Really enjoyed our conversation. Hope our listeners do as well. So let's get started. Hey, Kenny, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, good. Thank you for having me, Jason.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Appreciate you taking the time to join us. Look forward to diving into our conversation here all about OVRC. But before we do that, why don't you give our listeners just a brief personal introduction and maybe talk about some of your industry background?
Awesome. So I am the product manager for OVRC, responsible for the roadmap and strategic direction of where we take OVRC. I've been with SnapAV for about a year and a half, and prior to that, I've been with AT&T for about 7 years in various different groups, everywhere from managing UVerse technicians all the way to managing call centers. I did a mobile payments product. And then the last 3 years of that AT&T career, I spent my time in a group called AT&T Digital Life, which is a home security and home automation service that AT&T launched a few years back. So I was part of the original team that put together the business case and launched that product. So I was the director of product marketing there. So that was an eye-opening experience for me to get into home automation, and just really got me excited. And I coincidentally found an opportunity to come to Snap. I ran into the brother of our CEO today at just a social event, and that's got me to SnapAV.
Awesome. Well, that definitely sounds like a very relevant background, and clearly you've landed in a good place. SnapAV seems to be everywhere these days. We won't dive into it. It's not what we're here to talk about, but just tonight, as we're sitting here to record, saw the story that another acquisition of Autonomic today, and so a lot of activity there on SnapAV. And I know it's a company I've mentioned on our show before that we do a lot of business with here at my day job in Denver, and so we're big fans of what you guys are doing and your general value add for the industry. So seems like you landed in a good place. But let's dive in to talking about OVRC. Give us the quick elevator pitch. What is OVRC? And talk about, too, for our listeners who aren't familiar, the distinction between OVRC, the existing platform, and the later, the more recent version, OVRC Pro.
Sure. So OVRC is a remote monitoring and management platform that's about 2 years old. We launched our platform in 2014 at CEDIA. It's a platform that's completely developed in-house, and it was a tool that we designed so that our integrators could remotely manage and monitor the SnapAV connected products, Wattbox, Arachnus networking products, Luma surveillance products, and very soon our amplifiers. So they could manage those devices remotely to reduce truck rolls and provide a better experience for their customers. So, we've been in business for about 2 years, and we have quite a bit of a following. We now have about 250,000 devices connected to our platform and about 7,000 dealers using our platform.
Wow.
So, yeah, we're continuing to invest. We've been growing, and we did not expect this when we launched this. So it's been a really exciting ride for us.
That's great. Yeah. And so talk about, OVRC as a platform has existed here for a couple of years, but OVRC Pro is a little bit more of a recent announcement. So tell us about that.
Sure. Yeah. So about a year ago, we looked at the platform and we saw the growth, but we took a step back and should have put ourselves in the dealer's shoes, saying, is this a complete services tool? If I was a dealer and I'm servicing my customer, is this a complete tool for me to provide that service? And we quickly realized it wasn't. There were too many things. There's other things that are happening on the network. There's the ISP, there's third-party, other type of products on the network that's impacting the overall experience. So we embarked on a journey to how do we expand OVRC beyond just SnapAV products? And that's what we have OVRC Pro. So OVRC Pro is a premium suite of features that extends OVRC to everything else on the network, which gives dealers visibility and access to any IP device, as well as the internal, external network performance. And in addition to that, we've added an in-user app called OVRC Home, which dealers could customize and personalize for each of their clients, and give it to their clients as an extension of their service, which empowers the clients to instantly fix issues on their own if it's inconvenient to get a hold of the integrator. So a clear distinction there is this OVRC Pro is extending beyond the SnapAV products.
Got it. And that dovetails into one of the questions that I did want to make sure and hit on. So this category that I refer to as remote systems management is becoming kind of a crowded space. There's a number of people doing it, and I think that's great for the industry. I know that certain people look at OVRC and maybe initially think that it is just a platform for SnapAV products. And it sounds like you guys are really making a concerted effort to expand beyond that and not just be a proprietary solution for things that live in that SnapAV ecosystem, but to get out of that ecosystem as well. Just touch on that for people who may have that perception of OVRC.
Yeah, and that's been the case. Just as a manufacturer of all these products that we have, we started with supporting our products, but OVRC's mission when we first started was how do we add more value to our products and our dealers that are using our products. But our mission actually quite changed in the past year, which is now focused around how do we enable our integrators to provide better services to their clients. And we think that's really important. We think, this CD space, we know it's kind of plateauing. There's a lot of DIY and, external forces that allowing it to be much more competitive. There's pressures on hardware margins. And there are a lot of other people trying to get into our space, as we've definitely seen at CEDIA. So, we think providing a much better experience and service by the integrator to the client is extremely important. That makes it just much more sticky and provide more value to the clients that our integrators serve. So this is a definite intentional move by SnapAV to focus OVRC now on just really expanding it to the entire ecosystem of products that our clients our integrators are serving.
Gotcha. And you touched on it briefly, but maybe just provide some general or types of products that you see your dealers really applying OVRC Pro to and monitoring. If you can just kind of paint that for us.
Oh, sure. So, There's a lot of devices on the network. If you think about the home or client's network today, it's made up of, it's not uncommon to find homes with over 100 connected devices at that location. Anything from garage door controllers all the way down to mobile devices. You have PlayStations of the world. You have Apple TVs, Roku's, and even a very professional type of equipment that our integrators install, which is like AVRs and receivers. And those are products that historically haven't provided really a way for an integrator to access them remotely, such as a receiver. But now our integrators through OVRC Pro get access to it remotely, can monitor it, and if there's any issues, can proactively react to it so that their clients' downtime is really minimized.
Sure. Got it. And so just knowing a little bit about OVRC, again, from my day job here in Boulder, I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that there are some benefits to using OVRC Pro in conjunction with Arachnus networking gear, which is, of course, Snap AV's networking line. Can you touch on that a little bit and talk about what some of those are? There advantages to using it with Arachnus gear, or is it really completely ambivalent?
That's a good point. One of the benefits of being the manufacturer of the products that we make is we really own the end-to-end product. So meaning the hardware, the software in the product, the cloud, and the apps that interact with it. So having that native deep integrations to our products allow us to provide more powerful capabilities to the dealer. So for some of the examples are first one is troubleshooting the entire network with much more information, all from the single dashboard. So for example, if the client is having some issues accessing Netflix, for example, you can look across the entire network and see, okay, what's the bandwidth being consumed by each of the devices? What's the wireless signal strength of all the devices? Are there IP reservations or any static information that takes into account in troubleshooting? So things like that have starting to show on our platform that it's providing more value. So another example is OVRC Home. So using OVRC Home, the application, you can reset, a lot of different products, even our PoE ports on our Arachnus switches as part of a larger macro. So we're starting to do more and more of that, and you'll see us introduce a lot of those type of things in 2017.
Got it. Very cool. And I know that OVRC Home is definitely a product that a lot of integrators are talking about and excited about. You touched a little bit on it, what it is. It's a client-facing app that allows the integrator to empower the end users to do some of those reboots themselves. And let's just talk about that, expand on that a little bit more, because like I said, it is something that seems to be catching people's attention and a popular feature. So just give us the picture of why you think OVRC Home is important. And also you mentioned it there. I know the macros that you can do in OVRC Home, I think, is a relatively new feature. So tell us a little bit about that as well.
Awesome. Yeah. So OVRC Home, when we started this project for OVRC Pro, we asked the dealers, in providing services to your customer, what is your biggest challenge? And we were surprised to actually find that a lot of dealers told us, hey, we seem to have decent tools to remotely service clients, but our biggest two challenges are, first, we get too many calls from our clients. Some of them very small issues that really they shouldn't get calls about. And then the second one was the inability to really charge their customers and sell services because after the complexity of the systems that our integrator supports is getting much more greater. Therefore, there's more calls. So they needed something that's more tangible that they can sell and provide value to the clients from day one. So we created OVRC Home, which is an in-client facing app. It does a couple things. One, it allows the dealers to create commands for the clients to trigger. And these commands are basically macros in OVRC that reset one product or multiple products in sequence. And that's the macro that you mentioned. We just launched that about a month ago. and what you can, say reset internet button that you could create for your clients in OVRC Home will be resetting the modem, the router, the switch, and the access points. So you can do those things in sequence as part of one single button, which reduces your clients having to try to figure out what's wrong with the system. So you can really create an easy button for them. So the benefit was really, we're focused around reducing the number of support calls that our dealers get by allowing clients to fix things on their own, such as like rebooting a Roku or Apple TV, which happens all the time. And actually, from a client side, we found through our research that clients really want to be empowered to do things on their own. If they don't have to call the dealer and they can try to fix things on their own instantly, that's something that they found extremely valuable. So kind of putting all that information together, we worked on OVRC Home. And this is an interesting, we're passionate about OVRC Home because we want to continue to build consumer value and services into it that our dealers could, sell and provide more value to their clients.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point because, I have heard some concern. I don't know. I want to make sure I don't overstate this, but I think there's an underlying question with these client-facing apps of, well, are we taking ourselves maybe out of the equation, or are these clients going to maybe rely on this app too much and just go to a reset all the time when maybe there's a larger issue that's masking? But I come down on the side of that where I think it's really about the implementation. You talked about devices like Roku's, Apple TVs, cable boxes. I think if we're honest with ourselves, those devices, when they have an issue, I think 8% of the time, it's a simple reboot is the only thing that's going to fix it. And so I think empowering end users, I think that's an interesting point and sort of a nice counter to anybody who might be concerned about the fact that this app is maybe taking away some of the value that they provide as a service provider. Because I think at the end of the day, I agree with you. I think clients want to be empowered. They don't want to have to pick up the phone and make that call every time there is a hiccup. And so I think that's an interesting point. And also the tangible factor, right? Putting something in a client's hand that they can see and feel and touch, I think is also very important.
I think you brought up a really important point that, if OVRC Home is, provide a lot of commands to the clients and they continue to use it, it might be masking some real issues that are happening on the system, and that we heard that loud and clear early on in our development phase. So one of the things we were careful to add into OVRC Home capabilities is the ability for the integrator to first create multiple users in that location to access it. And whenever they trigger a command from OVRC Home, the dealer has a whole activity log of all the different commands set by which of the users. So, for example, if they have triggered a command for a receiver again and again and again, then that gives them some clues for the dealer to look at, whether it's an educational opportunity or more clues around there's real issues that are happening on the network.
Oh, very cool. I didn't realize that. I think that's a really thoughtful feature. And like you said, gives you some visibility. If your homeowners are constantly resetting the same device, then you can go back and get some visibility into that and understand that, there may be a broader issue or an educational issue, like you said as well. So I think I personally am a big fan of what you guys did with that. I love the vision, and I look forward to seeing, where that goes. Let's zoom out a little bit and just talk about the system architecture of OVRC Pro. What does this system contain in terms of hardware, software, apps, that sort of thing?
Cool. So OVRC Pro, once you purchase a SKU from snapbaby.com, we send you a box. The box includes an OVRC hub. This is the network appliance that once you plug it into your network and you just power it up, it automatically starts scanning your network, finding devices on the network that you pull into your OVRC account, and that you're starting to monitor. It monitors the ISP. We also have OVRC control system drivers. So we recognize that for some devices, like the control systems, we need to do deeper integration because it's more important. You need more information than just, being able to monitor it on the network. So these drivers that we built, the first two are Control 4 drivers and URC control system drivers. Once you load it onto the control system, it automatically starts reporting back to our cloud like a native OVRC product. And it gives its own status, its information, its health, and you can also reset those control systems, soft reboot those systems from OVRC. And then the third component of OVRC Pro is the OVRC Home, which is the end-user application that we just spoke about.
And is that app available on both iOS and Android?
Yes.
Okay, very cool. Just
Absolutely.
wanted to touch on that. Let's talk about the notifications a little bit. I know that's a big thing. I've played with a couple of different remote systems management tools, and I know that you can get a lot of different notifications, and there can be frequency settings on some of these. And how much configurability do you get with OVRC notifications, and what type? Do you have text, email, push notifications? Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. We currently support push and email notifications from OVRC, and it reports on everything from devices falling on and offline, as well as deeper device level notifications. So, for example, if the watt box has reached a certain voltage that it's not supposed to, it could send you a notification. So we have these type of things built into each of our products. It could send you more notifications. The settings, it's an interesting topic. We've had multiple debates, even with our internally and with our dealers as well. Well, there's some dealers that want all the configurations, capabilities in the world for notifications. There's some that just say, look, just make a kind of recommend some for us that makes sense. So we've been kind of teetering back and forth. Currently, we give our integrators the ability to turn notifications on and off by device and at location. So there might be some clients where you don't really, the client is very self-sufficient. They don't need to, you don't really proactively manage it. But there are some clients where it's, you need to pay attention. And then by the device level, there might be some devices where, it's very chatty device, and it might not be very critical to the experience the customer has at the home. So you want to turn those notifications off. So we give you the ability to get down to that type of granular level. Right now, we don't give the dealer to set any frequency. So how sensitive you want the notification to be. As we found after about 2 years in doing this, that there's a lot of devices that just go on and offline, and not necessarily that the devices are unreliable, but it's just the nature of an IP device on the network. So initially, we set a threshold for about 60 minutes. If it falls offline, usually the devices make its way back to the network. So if it comes back within 60 minutes, we don't send you a notification, but we capture that in the activity log. We've actually reduced that to about 10 minutes now. So when a device falls offline and stays offline for 10 minutes, then we send you a notification. In the future, we want to make notification better, because at the end of the day, we have some dealers that, let's say, manage over 500 locations and customers on OVRC, and that's just too many notifications to manage. So we're going to be introducing things like batch notifications or more critical levels of notifications, so that the integrator, could really become a service operator, really, to focus their energies on what's most critical.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and it's one of these nuanced things that I think if you're a home technology professional and maybe you're just looking at this space for the first time, that you don't necessarily, it doesn't jump to the front of your mind, but you quickly, when you get immersed into one of these platforms, will realize that the notifications can get overwhelming depending on the number of sites you're doing. And so I think as a company, you guys definitely would be well advised, in my humble opinion, to look at that and make sure that, give those dealers the option to kind of move things into, like you said, batch notifications, or maybe different settings for devices that are very critical versus those that are not so critical. And like you said, maybe very chatty. But I do, I see both sides of that coin. I think it's an interesting conversation. And like I said, one of those sort of nuanced things to remote systems management that maybe not everybody thinks about, but clearly you guys have it front of mind and see the importance of it. So let's walk through we talked about notifications. Obviously, when you get a notification, you're going to probably the first place you're going to go is the dashboard, the OVRC dashboard. Mm-hmm. Give us just an overview of what that is and how the data is presented, and also touch on that. You mentioned the dealer who has like 500 sites. I'm assuming this dashboard, has a mechanism for quickly getting to the information that you need.
Yeah, sure. This dashboard, so when you enable OVRC Pro at a location, you unlock a few more tabs. So currently at a location, you have the devices tab, and that lists all the devices at that location. With OVRC Pro, you unlock two more tabs. The first one's called the location dashboard, and the second one is OVRC Home Setup. So the dashboard was our effort in trying to make one single page of all the important information that you need to know as an integrator at that location to get a quick glimpse of the health of the network. So it includes everything from how many devices are online, offline. If there's any firmware updates available at that location for any of the devices, this would be for Snap AV products, you would get a notification there. You can run ISP speed tests. You can run it manually, and you'll also see a speed test history where you can go back in time to look at how the ISP has performed over time. You can also do a LAN test. So the speed tests allow you to do, measure the performance of the network coming into the home. The LAN test allows you to ping the devices internally to the network to see its health and the connections between devices. The third one is we have the wireless setup, which is, our dealers have to go into each access point to set up an SSID and repeat the next steps into the next SSID. So we allow them to create one and propagate it to any number of access points at that location. And then further down the dashboard, we capture all the wireless and wired clients on the network, so that dealers could quickly get a visibility of what's on the network, what's the status, and what's the health of those things on the network.
Got it. Very cool. And talk about multiple users and how that's handled. Obviously, every integrator listening has most likely multiple people working in the company. Does everybody get their own user within the company? Are there any limits or licensing involved with that?
Yeah, sure. So a few months ago, we introduced something called permissions control, which as a dealer, you could go into your account tab. And if you're the owner of that account, the OVRC account, and you have multiple technicians that work in your company, you can give them access to one to many location access. So if you have 10 customers and you have a new employee and you want to give them access to only a few of those jobs, you can do that using that permissions. So we've tried to build in a more granular permissions level that the owner of the account could grant. Very cool.
Well, let's talk about just from again, zooming out even higher a little bit, and we've talked about how the RSM space is filling up, and there's a lot of different options for integrators. What do you really see as maybe the small handful of key differentiators that OVRC and OVRC Pro provide versus competitive solutions out there?
Here I would have to really give big props to Stuart and his team at Hiji to really pioneering this space and really paving the way. I know they've been at it for about a decade now. So they've done some really good things, and I know Demotes is really picking up the space with a lot of innovation as well. So great things coming from both of them. Compared to these guys don't have, they're not a manufacturer of multiple lines of products. It's really just the RSM is their focus. So they have access and integrations to a wide breadth of products. And I think if I had to compare OVRC Pro at this point to those guys, I think that's where we're lacking a little bit. We have some catch-up work to do. But in that sense, I think we're making investments. We acquired a company called House Logics several months ago, And the reason for acquiring these guys are the industry experts in understanding how to integrate control systems and products. So we did that for that reason. But stepping outside of that, I think the key differentiator is the fact that we are the manufacturer of our own products. So because we own all the pieces of it, it allows us to introduce really powerful features. We're going to continue to, do things like OVRC Home multiple device macros. We got the Wi-Fi easy setup, and we'll be continuing to introduce things like that. And then, it can't be understated, but it's a solution that's fully supported and invested and committed by SnapAV. It's a company started by integrators to support integrators, and we fully intend to continue to invest in the platform to make the dealer successful.
Got it. Very good. Well, let's talk a little bit about the broad industry picture and where this fits in. You mentioned the guys at IHG, and really known for being kind of the original pioneers and champions of the RMR conversation that's become so big in our industry now, and for good reason. How does SnapAV approach RMR in terms of, do you take any sort of proactive approach in helping your integrators establish RMR programs, or do you stay more neutral in that conversation?
We are trying to be more proactive. We're being very careful in approaching this topic, primarily because, first of all, it's a very, very important direction that I think the industry has to move to. But it's also the same topic that we've been talking for years and years without much success. And so we're approaching it with caution. One, because we don't want to alienate any dealers who just move away from that type of conversation. But at the same time, we want to make sure that what we do is sets the right foundation to support our dealers to be successful. So if you go to our website today, you can download some collateral that we built, kind of like a white page or end user facing collateral,
like a white label,
right?
Yep.
Right. You can create a service plan based on that, but this is an area we're approaching with caution. We're having more and more conversation with our integrators as they start to explore OVRC Pro. And you can bet that in 2017, SnapAV is going to put a lot of resources behind trying to make dealers more and more successful in selling RMR.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes sense. I think that, a lot of the conversations around RSM tend to bleed right into conversations about recurring monthly revenue. And I see them very much as intertwined, but also very much as two separate conversations. And I think there's value in deploying an RSM solution, even if you're not necessarily looking to deploy that as part of a recurring monthly revenue plan. So just speaking about RSM in general, how important do you think these remote monitoring and management tools are to the future of the integration business?
We think it's absolutely important. It's one of the most strategic initiatives at SnapAV, and we believe that because, as we're all aware, everything's becoming connected. Everything's a lot of the systems that we've installed in the past, where it was much more self-contained. I think what we're all seeing is that devices are becoming more connected, more interdependent upon each other, and just the whole network is becoming much more complex. So I think it's crucial that integrators have access to the network and the visibility to it, so they can support their customers and make sure that experience is great. And without having this type of remote access, I think those integrators will quickly find that their profit margins, supporting these clients is going to really squeeze their business. So we hope dealers, using one RSM tool or even OVRC, will really adopt it and really use that as part of their normal business operations.
Got it. Well, we're running out of our time here, and so let's wrap up. What's next for the team at OVRC? Can you give us any hints about what we can expect in the coming months and maybe year?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned a little while ago, we have some catch up to do. There's some protocols that we need to continue to support, like SNMP. There's more control systems that our dealers are asking us to get access to with drivers.
Sure.
Deeper control systems and other type of services that our competitors have. So we're going to do all that, and they're all going to be introduced within the next few months. And we're already starting to see that. We're going to launch a complete new firmware of our hub next week, actually. This is a rewritten from scratch by the House Logics team. So wow. There's going to be a lot of it's really cool feature sets like multiple VLAN scanning and things like that. But overall, big themes for next year. I won't say any specifics that we're going to be focused our resources on is first, doing things that make networking just much more easy and transparent. We're going to do a lot more with our Arachnus products and making it easier for our integrators to support a network. Second, we want to continue to invest that allow dealers to be successful in selling services. So whether that's adding value, whether that's communicating value to the end client. So we want to continue to invest there. And then the third piece is providing valuable consumer services. So moving into more software services that dealers could sell through to their clients. So stay tuned for all that.
Very cool. I love it. And, honestly want to commend you also just for saying you guys have some catch up to do. I think that it's a very robust platform where it is right now. And I love hearing that you're staying hungry and continuing to work on it. I think that that's one of the most valuable things that we have as an industry right now in terms of RSM, which I think is hugely important to our future personally. The fact that there are so many people doing it now, I think validates the idea and is really driving innovation. And I think a rising tide raises all ships there. So commend you guys for what you've done so far and look forward to seeing what you can do, in the coming months and year. Let our listeners know really quickly if they're curious to find out more or maybe connect with you personally, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Oh, sure. If you want to find out more about OVRC or OVRC Pro, we have some good resources available at snapav.com. We also just redid our microsite overc.com. That used to be more dealer facing, but we actually kind of shifted gears a little bit where the story is more towards end clients. So you can find a little bit more information there. And if you want to connect directly with me, hey, we're open here at SnapAV. It's kenny.kim@snapav.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Kenny, for taking the time to join us here on Home Tech. We really appreciate it and look forward to seeing what you guys can do.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, Jason.
All right. Take care.